All right, good evening, everyone. Seeing that it is 6:30, March the 20th, 2024, it appears that we do have a quorum here, both in combination of those that are members of the committee at home as well as those who are in person here. We thank everyone for your flexibility as we continue to try and offer as much access to these meetings as possible, and we are offering this meeting via a hybrid format tonight. As always, we thank WCTV for their partnership. This meeting is being recorded by WCTV and will be available for future viewing for members of the community. Tonight, we have a lot to get to and to cover, and we'll work through that as quickly as we can. Again, we welcome our partners, Doran Whittier, as well as our owner's project management team, who is remote tonight. With that, we'll start, though, with calling this meeting to order. And as we always do, we will go through roll call. Julie or Sarah, I think you're going to help with that.
Dr. Brand?
Yes.
Rogerio?
Here.
Paul's in the room, right?
Yes, here.
Diane Allen? John Holloway? Greg Bendel?
Here.
Kevin Kyra?
Here.
Kate Bissell? Here. Stacy Scott? Christine Holleran? Here. Alice Brown LeGrand? Here. Dennis Kelly?
Here.
Lou Smiglia? Paul Malorani? David Ragsdale? Marianne Galezo? Here. Michael Fosio?
Here.
Craig Miner?
Here.
Vivian Garvedian? Christine Prendergast? Here. Sorry, I missed that one. Christine Prendergast
Yep.
in the room?
Here, Julie.
Christine is here.
Thank you. Justin Couché?
Here.
And that is everyone.
Thank you, Julie. Moving on to the second order of business tonight is the approval of the minutes from our March 6th Wildwood Early Childhood Center School Building Committee meeting. These were disseminated or distributed in the packet. We are looking for a motion to approve tonight.
Motion to approve?
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Julie, if you could assist with roll call, please.
Dr. Brand?
Yes.
Paul Rogerio?
Yes.
Greg Bendel?
Yes.
Kevin Kyra?
Yes.
Kate Bissell? Yes. Sorry. Christine Holleran? Yes. Alice Brown LeGrand? Yes. Dennis Kelly?
Yes.
Marianne Galezo? Yes. Michael Fosio?
Yes.
Craig Miner?
Yes.
Christine Prendergast?
Yes.
And Justin Couché?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much, everyone. Moving on tonight to our third item and the main aspect of our meeting tonight as we continue to, with this project, move forward, again, with the guidance and leadership of Doran Whittier, our design team, around probing deeper into the evaluation of the many options that are right now currently before us of consideration. We're getting very close to a point in which this project needs to narrow down in scope and the total number of options that can be advanced to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And tonight, Ronnie's going to take us through in just a moment with a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of the matrix that's being used as an evaluative tool to try and help us in this decision-making. And I say us again to underscore for our community the decision-making authority of this committee, the School Building Committee. Tonight, as you'll see in the material, there's also information related to cost assessments or costs with these various options. And so with that, Ronnie, thank you for all of your work, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. So the goal for today is reevaluating the options that we've been looking at through this process, and then establishing, reviewing the established criteria with the cost to identify the highest performing alternative that would then move on to be studied in the next phase, which is called the preferred schematic. So here, just as a refresher, are the 15 of the 18 options that we are looking at. And at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, we reviewed 8 of the 9 criteria or categories in the evaluation matrix, and today our focus is on the cost. So as a refresher again here, MSBA requires that the shortlist include at least one alternative from each of the grade configurations, so pre-KK, pre-K3, and pre-K5, and then one alternative at minimum from each of the following, being a renovation addition and new construction option, and then also including repair alternatives. For the purposes of this project, the Wildwood project would actually move forward automatically. The Woburn Street and North Intermediate School repair-only options would be for comparison purposes because it does not include the pre-KK population. So over the summer, the design team visited each of the locations to assess current conditions of the buildings and the sites. This is a snapshot of the results scored to give you an understanding of how each school compared to the others. As expected from the buildings, they're all of similar vintage. Scores are not that far apart. In general, North Intermediate had more updates to the building over time and has scored higher than Woburn Street and the Wildwood schools. The design team then generated a list of repair items and code requirements that is referred to as the capital improvements plan to extend the life of each of those buildings. This is the basis for the repair-only options, and we'll refer to that later in the presentation. So the work proposed in those repair-only alternatives are not just cosmetic, but look to extend the infrastructure of the buildings as well as meet current codes. Individual items on the list may not trigger codes, but several smaller projects or even one larger project can definitely trigger the code upgrades, and so therefore they're included as part of those repair-only alternatives. So now we're going to get into the cost. For the pre-KK alternatives, you can see that the repair-only option at Wildwood is in the $26 to $29 million range. That includes all of those code triggers that we just discussed. It does not include any educational improvements such as modifications of space or adding any additional square footage. The add reno and new construction options are in a similar range. They range between $78 million and $88 million. Pre-K3 alternatives include consolidation of 2 of the 3 schools, Wildwood and Woburn Street. The repair-only option you'll see is grayed out because it's for comparison purposes. The add reno and new construction options here, again, are in a very similar range. They range between $130 and $150 million, depending on the site. Some of the sizes of the sites are double the of others, so there's just naturally more site work costs that are involved. And then renovation versus new square footage in each of these options. A full consolidation of all 3 schools is estimated at $188 to $215 million. I know that these numbers can be shocking. We have actually checked the costs against some of the MSBA projects that are currently in the pipeline, and so we wanted to share some of that information with you. So MSBA, they do share historical and current cost data for projects on their website. This yellow line that you see represents the average cost per square foot, and it's hard not to notice that escalation has impacted construction over the last several years. We've also included the Wilmington High School information because that was the most recent major high school or school project in this town. but it does not actually make it onto the chart just because of the timeline. When we look closer at projects currently in the feasibility and schematic design phases, which is where we are with the MSBA, the costs per square foot are definitely closer in range. And the best way to evaluate these are by cost per square foot, because we don't have the specific enrollments and sites detailed on the chart. The estimates shared today fall in line with other elementary projects currently in the MSBA pipeline. So we extracted out all of the other information and we focused just on the elementary school projects. There are 7 that are currently in the pipeline with MSBA, and they range from $699 to $1,001 per square foot. So the average is around $844 per square foot, and so we are right within the range of similar projects. So after looking at all of the costs, we did understand that the costs were in such a similar range, and we tried to score them in a number of different ways. And no matter how we scored it, it did not change the ranking of the alternatives and how they scored. And therefore, we did not actually score the cost. So this was where we were left at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. And now with the cost, as you can see, there is no change in which alternatives scored the highest. So for right now, as a preliminary scoring, the repair only at Wildwood would move forward. The new project at Wildwood would move forward. The new project at Woburn would move forward. The new project at North would move forward. And we also need to include an ad reno, and the ad reno at North was the one that scored the highest, so we've included that as well. You know, one of the things to remember is that the town has partnered with the MSBA, and they will contribute a percentage of the total cost of this project. At this phase, the MSBA reimbursement for eligible expenses is not factored into the cost that you are currently seeing. Once a selected option moves into schematic design, we would be able to then do the calculations to determine what the actual reimbursement rate would be with the MSBA. There are many factors. There are costs that are not eligible, and so therefore for us to do it at this time would be very preliminary, because we don't actually know what costs MSBA will deem eligible for reimbursement. And so it would be premature for us to try to give you that number at this time. So there is reimbursement that is not factored in here. So this total number that you are seeing is not solely on the town. MSBA is a partner here. It's just that the costs right now do not reflect that. I'm gonna pause there. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Ronnie.
I have a question. Well, this is Kevin Kyra. What is the, I know you can't give us a figure, you just said it, but what is the percentage average that a community gets back? You must have that kind of an idea. Is it 20%, 25, 28, 30? What would be the average?
Julie, could you speak to that?
I can, yes, all communities are different. I can't tell you the exact number across.
I'm not asking, Julie, as I said, I'm not asking for the exact number, I'm asking for a percentage average.
And I can't give you that tonight, Kevin. Across the state of Massachusetts, different communities have different needs. So we'll use, for example, New Bedford, their percentage rate is a lot higher than, say, even Wilmington. So it's difficult for us to say that, a percentage average across the board.
Julie, just if I can,
That for me is a little surprising, since you're in this business. Thank you.
well, just to clarify, Mr. Kyer, if I can, with Julie, does MSBA actually track and make that that value or that numeric publicly known? Do they state or report out? Is that a figure that we could get for the community, or is that simply something that MSBA doesn't make available to the citizens of the Commonwealth?
The MSBA doesn't provide that as an average because, like I said, all communities are different. They do provide a lot of documents and data on their website that you can look at all communities that have participated in the program. And you can see what their eligible costs were, and then you can see what the reimbursement rate was after all eligible costs have been factored in.
Do you know what they use to factor in the percentage? Do they use the town's bond rating? Do they use if the town is more affluent than another town? I mean, is that all taken
Yeah, all
into
of those things are
consideration, Julie?
factored in. Yeah, all of those things are factored in. The amount of students, of this average median income, it's all factored into their equation.
Mr. Kyra, can we ask a clarifying question? Are you asking what the district's current base reimbursement rate is, or are you asking what typical net effective reimbursement rate is across the Commonwealth?
I'm asking what the average percentage is for our size district that maybe the community might be anticipating getting back the reimbursement.
Yeah, that's really hard to speculate about, because as Julie mentioned, every community is different. In fact, the MSBA doesn't even calculate a net effective reimbursement rate. They only calculate their maximum facilities grant in dollars. And even for our own Dorn Whittier projects, we've seen wide ranges in what that net effective reimbursement rate is, depending on the specifics of the project.
Just sticking with this point, because it's an important one. I know, Mr. Kyra, and then if we can get on to other questions. I could imagine that members of the community might be highly interested in what the reimbursement rate was for this high school project. But is that even something that could have shifted, let's just say hypothetically, and I don't know myself exactly what it is, I know I've seen it in print before. Let's just say, for example, it was 40% in 2013 when I think that the figures and such for the high school project was locked in. Is it fair to assume that we can't assume at all that 40% will be the reimbursement rate for this project because factors could have changed? Is that fair to assume, Julie?
Yeah, that's fair to assume. It was over 10 years ago that the original reimbursement rate for the MSBA was calculated for the high school, and so things have changed since then. So every project, they calculate those percentages based on where you are at the given time of your acceptance into the program.
And regardless of when the option moves forward, when will the community of Wilmington, the town of Wilmington, find out exactly what the reimbursement rate is? Do you have an estimated time frame or time period for when that information becomes more dialed in on?
So we need to go through a series of meetings with the MSBA. Once we get down to our preferred schematic option, which is the PSR preferred schematic report, we then take all of the data that's provided during the estimate, plug it into a spreadsheet with the MSBA, and then they determine what is eligible and what is ineligible. I wish that I could tell you that everything on this project is eligible, but they do have caps on certain areas. So right about after that meeting, we should know. And I believe, Ronnie, if I have it correct, we're submitting the PSR in August. Is that right?
Yes, so we would submit PSR in August, and we would go through this process with the MSBA to figure out the numbers in the early part of 2025 per our current schedule.
I guess one other thing, and I think maybe what Kevin's thinking too, is, so say we took Durham Whittier's last three schools, and I know Wilmington can't be matching those towns. On those last three schools you completed, did MSBA, what were the three percentages that those three schools got? Was it 20%, 30%, and 40%? Was it 20, 20, and 20? Just so we know that, it could be a range, but, what were those last three projects you did, and where did they end up? And it doesn't have to match Wilmington, but it gives us an idea that the potential's anywhere from 20% to 40% on.
Yeah, so let's be careful about language. So there's two types of percentages that people often refer to. One is the MSBA's base reimbursement rate. That's a rate that the MSBA establishes with a district based on all those things that you mentioned, Mr. Kyra, socioeconomic conditions, population, cost of living, and so on. And there's some detailed information on the MSBA website about what that math is. So that's the first kind of number that we should talk about, the base reimbursement rate. And then there's a second number, the one that more people are interested in, but less, it's more difficult to get a handle on, is the effective reimbursement rate. When everything is closed out, right, what percentage did we get back from the MSBA relative to the total project cost? And I think it's the second number that you're asking about.
Yes.
So to give you two data points, we had one project, a middle school, where their effective reimbursement rate was 40 points lower than their base reimbursement rate. And that had to do with all of the calculations related to ineligible costs and the market conditions of construction at that particular moment. Luckily for that community and many communities in its cohort, the MSBA revised its calculation later to raise the reimbursement rate and allow them to have more money. We haven't done a calculation to figure out what that is since that occurred to them. Another project that's just going into schematic design right now has an effective reimbursement rate 15 points lower than what the base MSBA reimbursement rate is. So that gives you some sense of how widely these numbers can vary and why it's so hard to pin this down right at this particular moment.
Thanks, Jason. Other questions from members of the committee? We'll try our best to balance remote and in person.
I know someone here had I think you were short a question.
I was just going to comment and contribute, Ronnie, as the sustainability lead. We also get credits depending on the selections and choices we make in the building process. So that has a factor as well. It also has a return on our value from our operations perspective. So it's a complex equation.
Yes, it definitely is. It's all, it all gets put together, and that's part of that whole back and forth with the MSBA to figure out what's going to be eligible and be able to potentially have more points for the district. Yep.
So we were just talking about the timeline a little bit ago, but I just want to kind of pin down. So we're now, now we're going to shortlist, and then eventually we need to actually settle on one actual school, like one project. Where in that process do we start getting reimbursement rates from the MSBA? Essentially, do we know what kind of reimbursement rate we're getting before we have to narrow it down to one option, or do they need to see our final choice before they can get deep in enough to give us the percentage, the reimbursement rate?
So they will, so we're gonna go to the short list from here, and then in PSR, which is the next phase, from April through August, we will work to provide more detail and then eventually vote on one preferred option. That will go into schematic design. So once we submit in the fall, we will work on the schematic design to get it to a much higher level of detail for a much more detailed cost estimate. And then using that cost estimate, SMMA will do a separate cost estimate, and we will compare the two to make sure that we have a similarly aligned estimate for the project. And then we will fill out a form, it's called a 3011 form with the MSBA. And in that form, there's a lot of detail that gets broken out, and that is when the MSBA will tell us what the effective rate will be for this project. So, and that's what would happen in early of 2025.
All right, so just tell me if I'm right, that therefore we have to choose our project so that it can actually go into schematic design and get that level of detail before we learn what the reimbursement rate is going to be.
Correct. So
MSBA.
before the town votes on whether or not for the project to move forward, you would know what that effective rate will be. But prior to that, we wouldn't know until the fall, till the early part of 2025 what that number is.
Okay, so yeah, right, we'll know before it goes to the town, but this committee won't know before we have to narrow down to
Right, we won't have an answer for
a
the
preferred
effective, yeah,
project.
because they just won't do that calculation for 18 options, right? They want it to be developed to a point where we have a much clearer estimate for what the project will be before all that detail is worked out.
The tough thing on that is, like, say the $194 million is out, and the town doesn't wanna spend that money. But you find out with the reimbursement, that's really 165, maybe we should've kept it in. So if we narrow it down, are we eliminating, and not knowing the reimbursement, you're eliminating maybe an option that was bigger or different, because you're looking at the base number now opposed to what your number really is gonna be. So you could miss out on an opportunity because not knowing the percentage, and people looking at numbers and going, well, I don't wanna have a loan for 150 million, I wanna have a loan for 79.
Right.
You know, so,
Well, I would let, yeah, go ahead.
To follow up on what Dennis, 100% agree. I mean, it's a huge factor at this point to know what we're gonna get back for reimbursement. Because the town might not buy a pre-K through 5 versus a pre-K through 3. We're talking, millions of dollars. And we have to go in front of the town and say to them which is their best option and how they're gonna pay for it. And to Dennis's point, if we're gonna get a 40% reimbursement rate on a pre-K through 5, and we're gonna have to take that off the table, because at this point, we're looking at numbers, we don't think the town's gonna go for a $200 million school. I mean, I know this is a process, but I think it's very short-sighted at this point. I mean, we're gonna have one of these options, and we don't know what the reimbursement rate's gonna be on either one of them.
Christine?
Yeah, I agree, and the other issue too is there's been discussion about a second school on the, and I hate to use one side of town or the other, but on the other side of town. And if this is going for $200 million, and then you're talking about a second school, talking close to, $1 billion, $500 million, if you're looking way out into the future. So it's important to know some parameters here, if we're gonna move forward for the community.
For questions, if we can go to Lee, I see your hand up, and then Christine next.
Sure. I just want to say, Captain and Mary and I completely agree with you. This is a real difficult point in the project, right? Because we don't have that answer from MSBA. But what we're actually trying to do right now is not select the option and know what the reimbursement rate is. We're just trying to advance what you see on your screen here as options relative to each other to advance to the next phase, to get decisions made and understand what the MSBA reimbursement is. Before you have to make that decision going from the shortlist and GISAR to the one plan, we'll be able to run some numbers with MSBA to get each of these options that are on our final shortlist and understand within a range, just like we're presenting this cost, what that effective reimbursement rate would be. It won't be your baseline rate, but we'll be able to suss out some of the eligible costs and ineligible costs and give you a range of what the potential impact of MSBA reimbursement would be before you have to pick your final option to move into schematic design. So right now it's difficult because we can't say one number over another because we just haven't had that conversation with MSBA, and they're going to ask for a lot of detail, which we will have produced by the end of the PSR phase. So I understand when we have this conversation with every community that we go at this point, we don't know what that MSBA reimbursement is. But you will get reimbursement on any one of these consolidation options, right, relative to each other. So carrying forward, that is always going to be equal for comparison on each of the options. And before you're in a position to pick one, we'll be able to give you ranges for each of these categories about what MSBA reimbursement would be before you have to move forward.
Thanks, Lee.
So, just to piggyback off, because David had asked that question, and he was told, no, we would only get the MSBA for whatever one we pick. So now we're saying that on the short list, you can run a sort of diagnostic with MSBA and get what the rate would be on each of these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Ronnie was saying earlier was that when we go from the many to the few, which is just the few, to the preferred option, when you move through that, they put a lot more 12, 8, 30, 11s to give you that range. Your base reimbursement has already been decided by the MSBA, so it's really what the effective reimbursement will end up being.
Thanks, Julie. For folks that are at home, if you have a question, because it's getting a little bit hard to navigate here, if you could kindly raise your hand on the virtual hand, I don't know what else to refer to it as, and we have help here monitoring. Christine, I know you've been waiting,
Okay.
go ahead.
Ronnie, when do we layer in the operating costs so that we can get that comparison of what is it gonna cost us to run one school for 3 grades, the 1 versus the 3, and build that comparison into the total equation?
I mean, we can definitely start doing that in PSR when we're starting to develop more information. It'll definitely be more detailed once we have one design and we're doing a full study of the preferred option, but we can work with our engineers to start looking at those costs.
Mr. Bendel, I see your hands raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Good evening. I was wondering, I think it's my understanding you'll be presenting under Article 2 at town meeting, is that correct?
Yes, my understanding is that there'll be the support to provide an update to the town at the town meeting, on the town meeting floor in May, yes.
Okay, great. And I think that's a great opportunity, and I would strongly encourage you to present this very slide. I think this is something that we'll need to get in front of the community as soon as possible. I can imagine there'll be quite a bit of feedback. I agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been made already here tonight. You can imagine that we will get quite a bit of feedback, so I would encourage you to make sure this slide is included.
I thank you, Mr. Bendel. If just to come back to questions in a second, but I think, Ronnie, could you just go back to the slide that shows the escalating costs for construction? I forget which number that is. But I think we were anticipating large numbers for, project estimates. I think that goes without saying, and we were expecting that, but it was and is quite staggering to see the price per square footage of construction go up over the last, we're in obviously 2024, so this data going back to 2020, and I think it's just important for the community member watching, and certainly our partners here can correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but it's important that these square footage costs are not MSBA square footage costs for construction, but they're individual project averages from what could be a variety of construction providers or partners, whatever the right terminology is. And it's just, I would imagine, reflective of the times and what we see as individual consumers on a small level, but magnified so greatly at a level of building a building that things have just gone up so very much. The $352 per square foot for which the building that we're sitting in right now was built, I guess this stands to sort of reason when we hear some of those price tags, and albeit they could be larger schools than the high school in the news, but when you hear price tags of high schools that are in the $400 million range or more, I think it's important as a reminder, a friendly reminder for the community that if we were to build this high school today, it would not be the same price that it was back in 2013. I'm not asking you to convey a number, but I can appreciate that there will be folks who will be stopped short in their tracks to say, wait a minute, how's this possible? It is staggering numbers. Just, maybe not a question, but also to point out, and I think if you could, the last slide that you were on, Ronnie, as we, as a committee, and of course as a community, are gonna go forward and navigate all of this and understand all of this and make a decision ultimately down the road, not tonight, but down the road, that project cost range, and I had a question if I could, you talked about triggers and the code triggers, and I think maybe if you could just real simply here tonight for those that are watching and members of the committee, the project cost ranges, so the repair-only options, for example, the Wildwood, the Woburn, and the North, we see those ranges, and I think we understand that they're high-level numbers right now. But incorporated into that, you mentioned are code triggers. Just for those that are not exactly maybe sure what you're speaking of there, could you expand a little bit on that and what that exactly is?
Sure. So, for example, any public building should be accessible, especially as school buildings. At North and Woburn, there are multi-levels at those schools, and there's no elevator. So if a parent wants to come and see their child's classroom and they're in a wheelchair, they are very limited in what they're doing. And for that reason, all of the school buildings are supposed to be up to code. And that work has been done over time, but, you know, an elevator, for example, is a very big project. And the other thing is when you touch 30% of the building, you start to trigger codes, the seismic code, for example. They'll want all of the walls to go up to the roof structure, and there would be additional bracing that may be required. So, you know, the fire suppression code, right now none of the buildings are sprinklered. And so you could trigger that code depending on how much work is undertaken within a certain amount of time. So the codes are written so that if you are going to work on your project, you are grandfathered in until you hit a certain limit. And once you hit that limit, they expect you to bring the building up to the current codes. When we build new construction or even an ad reno, those buildings as part of any project would be built to today's codes. But any repair-only project, you are somewhat grandfathered in until you hit a certain threshold. And that's just how they require projects to keep a handle on the cost that's being spent and making sure that the buildings are meeting up to the codes when possible.
So just if I could, one final question on that, then thinking about the repair-only option, because I'm certain, gonna guess that folks will sort of recognize and try and reconcile, you know, new construction versus repair-only. Is it then, based upon your projections right now, is it accurate to say that if the thought was, well, let's perhaps out of, you know, financial necessity, only tackle repair-only, for these schools. In the current dollar values of today that you have your estimates, is it the case that it would be approximately $100 million to repair the Wildwood, the Woburn Street, and the North? Am I sort of understanding that
Yes.
correct? Right, okay, just wanted to,
Yes, you would have to
Sure.
combine all three to
right.
address
Right.
all the pre-K-5 population.
One
Right.
quick thing. So when you look at it that way, it sounds like a big number, but we wouldn't probably do the entire Woburn Street at once, so we wouldn't trigger those right away. So if we did the window projects for $4 million, it doesn't trigger anything. Then the following year, you do the roof of the Woburn Street for $1 million, it doesn't trigger anything. I've now spent $5 million, but it still doesn't trigger it because I didn't do it as one project. It's only if you do the whole building as a project and do 30%, do you trigger all those code changes now.
Well, they have.
It doesn't change the learning environment, but I'm just saying.
Right.
So that folks can't just get out of meeting the codes, they have a time frame on it. So if it's within 5 years, for example, then it would trigger the codes. So it's the total amount of your projects over, say, the span of 5 years. And so if you were to, say, do the windows, and then you wanted to redo all the roofs and add insulation, if you wanted to redo the mechanical system, you would hit that threshold if you were doing those in consecutive.
Based on the value of what the schools consider today?
Correct. So it's all based on a percentage of the value of the,
So,
The
say the
building.
Woburn Street, what do you consider the Woburn Street worth? Based on,
Uh,
when you were in your calculation to figure out you need to spend 29 million and bring everything up. So do you think it's worth,
I
15
don't
million?
have the exact number, but we
No, no.
actually have done a regulatory write-up and analysis on this, so it is part of the report, and that'll actually get released to you in the next week or so.
Right, it's a good point.
So-
Lee, I see your hand up, but all of the information and assessments in the current conditions, or existing conditions, sorry, that make up those numbers that we're talking about repair only, that will all be released to the community as a comprehensive report.
Correct. So to this committee, it will be released prior to April 3rd because, and we were going to get into this later, but on potentially April 3rd, we would be voting to submit the PDP package to MSBA. So you will get to see, we've been working on finalizing a lot of these reports, so we're going to be releasing those to you so that you will have a chance to review them prior to the April 3rd meeting. And if, based on the date that we release it, if everyone feels that they need more time, we potentially would have to add a meeting before April 18th to approve the PDP package to go to the MSBA. So that will get released, and once it's packaged for the MSBA, we would then be able to also be able to release it to the community. So.
Lee, you had your hand up?
I think Mike had his hand up before, maybe he took it down, but.
Oh, sorry, I can't see everybody on the screen here.
Yeah.
Dr. Grant and Dennis's comments addressed what I was looking to speak to.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that on, the repair-only options relative to code upgrades, right? The code upgrade piece is based on the assessed value of the building, the town's assessment of it, which, we've done research on, and, a lot of the code triggers, work around 30% of that assessed value. If you're investing, amount up to we're gonna start triggering codes, the comparative purposes, right? We spent, months and months and months working through what the educational needs are of the district, and come up with an educational program, of the future moving forward with all of the different spaces. And it's a much different look than what is currently within the district. Repair-only options don't address any of that. And because they don't address your new program, right, they're not meeting your future needs as has been described, MSBA doesn't participate in repair-only projects that aren't going to fulfill your educational needs for the future, which makes sense, for them on the long-term investment as well. So you really have to take a close look at, the repair options, right, and value that you would get if you want to proceed, just because it looks like low-hanging fruit with a cost that's palatable. It's a much different animal when you compare that to a project that does get reimbursement from MSBA, that does solve all that we need. So we'll be working through that comparative process with you through the PSR phase, so that at the conclusion of that phase, we can present to you, a lot more information than you have now before you have to make that final decision. And I do completely agree with everything I've heard tonight. Reimbursement is a big deal. And, being able to message to the community, effectively what that contribution from MSBA is something that, we're going to be continuing to work on through PSR. But MSBA has to be a part of that process. And as a part of that process, they need lots of information. Nobody likes to give out information to the community and then have to change it later. So, while you're probably saying, well, why are all these people being so conservative about giving us a number? That's just really the facts of it. We need more information to develop it. And, we'll be able to get you some of that information at the next phase.
Thanks, Lee.
Can I add one more thing? I also just want to point out, the reason why MSBA wants you to carry a pre-KK, a pre-K3, and a pre-K5 option is they don't want you to discredit one of the grade configurations based on the cost, because obviously it can be a scary number. And they want you to carry that through, look at further development, have the potential to see a range of what your effective rate could potentially be in the next phase before you make that final decision to move into schematic design with one option. So they're very calculated with how they've done this. They want communities to not just discredit an option because of cost. They want you to go through the process to make sure you're making the best decision for the town and giving yourself the due time to really process that, review it, develop it, and then finally make a decision.
Unless there are other questions at this moment, I think, did you have some more slides that you, Ronnie, needed to get
Next
to,
steps.
or next steps? Okay. Any other questions, Jason, that you can, okay. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to item number 4 on the agenda tonight, and that is next steps. We are in the process of gearing up for our 3rd community forum, and that's scheduled for March the 28th at 7 o'clock. And so, Ronnie, you want to speak a little bit to that?
Sure, I'll just elaborate that, yes, March 28th, we'll have a community forum. We would invite all of the community members and anyone listening today to spread the word so that we can inform the community as much as possible, even though this is an early phase for them to understand the process. Especially now that we have numbers, I feel like people start to become more invested and want to learn more about why the numbers are what they are. So we will give an overview from the beginning of the process. So for anyone that is joining, we will provide an overview of how we came to where we are today. Also, part of that is getting feedback. We will use the Mentimeter platform to gather feedback from the community before this committee has to make a decision on that short list. So we will use the prompts, similar to what we've done in previous meetings, to gather information, allow the community to provide feedback on each of the configurations, pre-KK, pre-K3, pre-K5, but also as a whole, we'll give them an opportunity to rank what their preferred options are. And that way, we will have that information for you at the next meeting on April 3rd to help you determine how to finalize that short list.
And we're again planning to offer the forum via hybrid.
Correct.
So both in person here in the large group instruction room on March 28th at 7 o'clock, but as well for those that are not able to be here in person to join virtually. But the Mentimeter will also leave open after the fact, and so people who are viewing the recording can still get up to speed and provide their feedback, which was it was really successful last time, right? Can you just remind us off the top of your head, Jason, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but total feedback that we received through the Mentimeter platform was over 150?
Over 140.
Over 140 community members. So really huge levels of participation and interest across our community on this project, which is both great and understandable, and we'll try and continue to provide access as widely as we can for people to tune in and become a part of this important journey. The item 5 is the Public Relations Working Group. Vivian, are you on here? You are. There you are. Welcome.
Right on time. So the Public Relations Working Group has been meeting regularly on a weekly basis, and with that we have worked to promote the upcoming Community Forum number 3. We not only have assistance from outside individuals from the school building committee to participate and join and help us with this endeavor to get as much of the information out to the public, as well as utilize every opportunity and channel to broadcast not only the flyer, the website, and get the word and message out for the public forum that is upcoming. In addition, we have also been working internally and finalized the language and the layout for the message to go into the water bill. And those are underway as well, and we're working on printing, cutting, and in order to provide to the town to be incorporated as part of the outgoing water bills, soon to be sent out in April.
Great. Thanks, Vivian. Any questions for Vivian?
Yeah, Dr. Grant, I have one. Great job, Vivian, nice work. Question, I've seen it advertised on Facebook about booths for the July 4th celebration for the community. Have you reached out to them at all?
Yes, we have. We have.
Is there any charge for that? Do you know?
Michael has been tasked with, is it Michael or Justin? I can't remember which one of you was tasked to reaching out to them. I know that we were supposed to discuss that, Marianne, this Friday, where it's our standing meeting internally, but we have looked at not only the farmers market as well as the 4th of July event.
Vivian, this is Justin. Sorry, Marion.
Justin, thank you.
Yeah, so I reached out to the 4th of July committee. There is no charge for a booth at the 4th of July.
Great, I guess the only, is probably going to man it would probably be the biggest challenge.
Right, we'll be looking for volunteers from the school building committee, since we're the most informed. And I would ask members of the school building committee to assist in manning the booth so that any questions directed to the project can either be accounted for or responded to. We've also asked the committee to assist in putting out flyers on local businesses in preparation for the community event coming up.
And this question is probably more for Lee, maybe. How close will we be to having any sort of MSBA percentages by July 4th? Would that be possible at that point?
It may be July 4th, might be a little bit early for us in that project. You know, we're cost estimates coming back, and it's the new revised data, which is gonna help us kind of sort costs and find out what's eligible, what's not eligible. So I think July 4th might be a little early before we have that done.
The reason why I asked, this is like the biggest community outreach that we possibly do. I mean, everybody in Wilmington goes through the July 4th celebration. And to have as much information at that booth would benefit this project in so many ways.
I
Totally agree.
Yeah, I think we can do some work, like, Marion, like you had asked us with this cost estimate, right? Because it's early and it's got a range, margin of error, you know, maybe we can try and work together on something like that with MSBA, where we're not gonna pin them down on an exact rate, which won't happen until it's schematic design, but to get closer, to give people a little bit idea, you know, to Kevin's point, you know, is it 20 to 40%, you know, it's 10%, or what, so we hear you, we like to give you that information as early as we can too, so, you know, let's try and work that as a goal to see, you know, how close we can get and how fine we can get that, the granularity of that reimbursement rate.
I mean, this will be the biggest outreach that we can do to the community. I know you guys aren't familiar, but the 4th of July, everybody comes through the 4th of July in the town of Wilmington. You know, you get 80% of the community down there at one point. So to have something to grasp onto for the community, even if it's a range, say, you know, 25 to 35, is something to give the community to be able to really, you know, tell them the numbers on this project. It would really benefit this project in so many ways.
Agreed. I mean, my family attends the 4th of July festivities every day. And it's not just the town of Wilmington that attends, it's all of the surrounding towns as well gather. And I hear you and I agree. We'll work to kind of give a range, and I will make sure to be part of the booth, you know, representation to kind of give a range, and in hopes of also maybe work with the finance committee and getting understanding within that range what it means per household. Because ultimately, everybody's gonna wanna know, besides the range, what is MSBA contributing and how much that takes away from the project cost, but what does that equate to them, right, in their bills? So maybe we could find a happy medium without the definitive answer from the MSBA, but within a range to work together and provide that level of information.
Right, I agree with the range. The range would be beneficial. I don't want to get into numbers and how much it will cost the per se, the taxpayer, because we need to decide how much the town contributes from our capital stabilization fund and our free cash. So those are all in play also. But just a range for an MSBA grant would be huge.
Thanks, Vivian. Thanks, Marianne. Julie?
In addition to the 4th of July festivities, we were talking about town meeting. Our intention is to have a table outside at town meeting as well, providing this information so that when people come in, they do see, you know, what we've been working on. I have asked Vivian to see if she can get volunteers to man that table as well, on, I believe it's Saturday, May 4th. So I think it's important that we start to get, you know, public participation in this, and having a table with our shortlisted items would be helpful.
Agreed, Julie, thank you. Sticking with you, Julie, do you want to talk a little bit more about item number 6 in the approval vote of the preliminary design program submission?
Sure, Ronnie, do you want to go back one slide? There we go. So we have scheduled another meeting for April 3rd to finalize the shortlist project that we have just shown you, the 5 that we were looking to move forward. As Ronnie mentioned earlier, they're going to start providing us with pieces of the PDP submission as it comes available so that everyone can read it. It's a very large document. When I say large, it's, usually typically about 2 binders full, and it includes all kinds of information. Not only about what Dorian Whittier has uncovered in looking at your existing buildings, not only the information that we've been looking at, these 18 options that we've been going through, but it includes all of the meeting minutes for all of the meetings that we've attended, community forum. There's documents that the town needs to provide to us. So as this comes out, they're going to be providing it to everyone so that you can review it, so that on April 3rd, we can approve that PDP submission. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, I know without seeing it in front of you, it's difficult to understand. But the goal is to get in the next, between now and April 3rd, all of that information to you in small bits and pieces so that you can read through it, so that we are able to approve that on April 3rd.
Any questions for Julie on that?
Question for Julie. Back to having the table at town meeting. What are we anticipating for having for reading materials, displays, et cetera? Who's working on that?
So typically, Dorian Whittier helps us put together our presentation materials, so that we stay standard across the board. We'll have posters similar to the ones that are in the lobbies. Those ones will be replaced once we shortlist the final PDP submission. So we'll be replacing those in all of those locations. So we'll be bringing those boards. We can create pamphlets as well.
And we would be working with Julie and AI and Dorian Whittier as part of the public relations working group. We have been working with them to kind of give guidance and direction, as well as receiving some suggestions from them. It's been more of a collaborative effort to put together not only the flyer for the upcoming community forum number 3, as well as the content for the boards, and we'll be continuing to do that moving forward.
I think it would also be helpful if we took Kate Thistle's video and played it on a loop. So we would have to see about putting a television or a monitor where we can play that video on a loop all day long. I think people will stop when they see a screen and look at especially pictures of the current conditions and what could be. And I think that that is something that people really enjoy. And it does prompt people to ask a lot of questions.
Where my head goes that I think we should consider is a storyboard format, so that we can see that funnel that we're working through and people understand the progression of the timeline with that funnel.
Sure. We're open to all suggestions, so you're more than welcome to, we can talk about this on Friday and
Yeah.
the PR group.
Okay, thanks, Julie. Thanks, everyone. Item number 7 tonight are committee questions. Members of the committee have questions, material tonight, or what's next? Not really a question, but just to update the committee on the educational program plan. I mentioned this before. This is an important part of this upcoming submission in April. That was presented as a first read to the school committee at their last meeting, and we anticipate their approval for that at their next meeting next week. And that, I think I've shared a draft version of that with this committee, but I'll be sure to share the final version with the committee. And again, that's part of the package that will be submitted to MSBA in just about a month's time. Okay, item number 8 today, public comments. Members of the public, either, well, not at home, they wouldn't be at home, but here in person. If you could come forward, use the microphone, and if you would be as kind to identify yourself and your residence.
Sure. Can you hear me? Or is this not turned on?
It's just for recording.
Oh, okay.
This is actually picking you up to send you.
Okay. My name's Suzanne Kroll. My address is 21 Blueberry Lane. So I am an SLP in this district since 2005. I've had the opportunity to work in several schools, including the Wildwood, the Boutwell, the West, the middle school, and I'm currently at the Woburn Street. I was at the Wildwood in 2005, and the school was in very poor shape then. My own children, I am a Wilmington resident, went to the Wildwood, the Woburn Street, and now one's at the North and one's at the middle school. I was on the Wildwood Envisioning Committee in the fall, and I also had an opportunity to visit the newly built Central Elementary School in Tewksbury. My concern is that if we don't plan now and make big changes now, other schools may be in the same predicament that the Wildwood is in right now. I feel like we need modernized schools. We don't need to just repair the current elementary schools. Frankly, I think that would be a disgrace to Wilmington and to the elementary schools and to the children of Wilmington. Right now, there's a lack of classroom space and office space at the Woburn Street School. Many classrooms house several staff members, which makes it difficult and distracting for students to learn. And it's especially challenging for special ed staff to find a quiet space to do assessments. For instance, in one classroom, there's 3 reading specialists in one space. And where I work, there's 5 special education staff members, including myself, that share one space with dividers so that we cannot see each other, but we hear each other. And there's nowhere else for us to go. A lack of space for staff meetings and meetings for parents is another issue. Right now, we have meetings in our assistant principal's office, so she has no place to go when we're in meetings. At the Woburn Street School, the heat is an issue. It's, in my office, or my classroom, it's 85 degrees year-round, especially on the sea level. Even right now, when I go into my office every morning, it's 85 degrees, and our climate control is opening and shutting the windows. In the summer, it gets up to be 90-something degrees, and you can imagine how students and staff feel sick at the end of the day. Literally, we feel sick. We can't see out our windows. I like to talk about vocabulary and the weather, and it's kind of comical because I ask the kids what the weather is, and we can't see out the windows to talk about the weather. A few times this year, debris fell onto the counter, making loud noises while I was working with a student. We both jumped, and I was trying to figure out where this debris was coming from. And after some investigation, I realized it was the caulking from the windows where it was falling. Just this past week, a student asked me, "Why is there a crack in the wall?" And I'm thinking, well, this building's old, cracks happen. We've had several water leaks from the ceiling. We've had water tiles, or leaks from the floor tiles. My daughter told me when she was at the Woburn Street, her teacher had to buy new carpets, new rugs, because water was seeping up from the floor. And this also makes me question if there's hidden mold within the floors and ceilings. Several of the sinks are hand washing only because they're not safe for drinking. We've had lots of plumbing problems in the bathroom this year, leading to odors. And we've also had to have radon remediated this year. I was just looking at the costs of noticing the difference between the cost of renovation and new buildings. It's not that much different between those two costs. I think there are huge benefits to consolidating the schools to pre-K through 5. There'd be less transitions for our students. The staff would be able to easily consult from one grade level to the next. Students will feel part of a community for a longer period of time. I think we absolutely need air conditioning. It would benefit hundreds of students in 1 year and thousands over the lifetime of the school and the staff so that we can focus on learning. More staff would be able to collaborate on CIT days for professional development since they'd be on the same schedule. I'm also wondering if this would help alleviate transportation issues if buses are traveling to one school instead of two. And then a few notes I took when I visited the central school in Tewksbury, and they also noted that they had a lot of support from their community to build their school. Their only concern was transportation and if there would be more traffic, but they alleviated that by building like a long, big circle around the school the buses pulled into so that the buses were not blocking traffic on the main street. Other things I noticed was the visitors had to be buzzed through 2 sets of doors to get full access into the building, which is a great safety measure that we don't have right now. Walking through the building was a comfortable temperature. They had STEM rooms available for student use. The building was clean and equipped with modern technology in each classroom. They also used their cafeteria, which had a stage, and they used that for presentations for the school. And it was really cool because their cafeteria tables transformed into benches so that then the kids could sit and watch a performance. And if there were after-school events taking place in the gymnasium, they had their hallway doors locked to provide security to the school when it was open to the public. Now, I understand that building a new school will be expensive, and it is shocking when you see those numbers. However, if we don't do this now, then the residents of this town probably won't see new elementary schools in my lifetime. I've already worked here for 20 years, and we haven't had a new elementary school that was in dire need. I understand that getting state funding for any school project is a long process, which is why I believe we need to take advantage of the free money now and build a pre-K through 5 school now, because the cost of building, it's only going to go up with inflation. I also think that we need to learn from past projects. I also worked at the middle school, and not putting air conditioning in the middle school, in my opinion, was a huge mistake. Again, it gets up to be in the 90s on that 3rd level. Building a new school will be expensive, but the residents, our children, and the teachers in this town deserve schools that are safe, clean, comfortable, modern, and welcoming. And something else I was thinking of as I was sitting here listening was when the residents of the town were asked to go to the Shriners Auditorium to vote. I think it was for the feasibility study for the Wildwood. The line was out the door. There were hundreds of residents there, myself included. I couldn't even get inside to vote. The vote overwhelmingly passed because education is important to the residents of this town, and I think we need to keep that in mind. Thank you all for listening and for your commitment. I know this is a difficult decision, and thank you all for your time and commitment to this project.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before she leaves, I would actually encourage her, since she's not only a resident but an employee of the town, to join us as part of the 4th of July celebration. The farmers market, if her schedule allows, to state exactly that, because that is the message that we're trying to convey to the community, how vital it is and how important it is to do this project now. And as you guys have already witnessed, the escalation of cost is just astronomical, and every year it's rising. And if we don't do the project now, chances are 2 years from now, if we are so lucky to be readmitted into the MSBA program, it will cost even more.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Amy Iasconi. I live at 247 Woburn Street. Thank you for allowing us to speak tonight. I'm a 5th grade teacher over at the North. I'm also the assistant principal there. In addition to that, I'm the elementary science lead teacher, so I wear a few different hats throughout the day. I've worked at the North for 22 years, and I've lived in Wilmington for 21 years. I have 3 kids in our schools. I have 1 at the North with me and then 2 at the high school. So as a taxpayer of Wilmington, I feel there's great value in building a school that houses our pre-K to 5 students. The grade level configurations that we currently have presents many challenges. Like Suzanne already mentioned many of the points that I was gonna say. Professional development among staff is very difficult, just traveling to different buildings. Teachers are not easily able to communicate with other grade level staff. There are too many transitions for many of our students. I think that's difficult for parents as well. Having 3 elementary schools can negatively impact our school climate and culture just when families and students start to form a connection with the staff and with the school. It's time to move on to a new building. Some of the challenges that we face in our current educational spaces are many of what Suzanne had said. Our classrooms at the intermediate levels are really not big enough for our large classes. We have classes upwards of 25 students, and the rooms are just not made to have that many kids in there. You know, we have a lot of our, especially in the intermediate levels, our classrooms are not equipped for a lot of these science labs that we do. We don't have sinks in the classroom, so that presents a challenge. We have a lack of storage and classroom space. Even our Chromebook carts can't fit into our classroom. Many of them are in the hallway. We have no electrical outlets. I think I have 2 in my classroom, or maybe 3. So we have a lack of electrical outlets just to plug anything in. There's not enough space for small group work for students. A lot of our tiles on our floor are made with asbestos, and those are chipping. They're all multicolored because they have to replace them here and there. They often have to do the work when we're out of the room or out of the building because we can't be in the space when they remove the tiles. We have inadequate space because many people are sharing classrooms, many special education teachers, many reading specialists. Just like Suzanne said, we have 2 reading specialists sharing a classroom, providing services all at the same time with multiple students. We don't have an elevator. Because of that, many classrooms have to change year to year depending on what the student's needs are. If we have a student that's in a wheelchair, that classroom has to move down to the 1st floor, and there's a lot of movement just because of that. We have lack of spaces to provide services to our special education students, for our Tier 2 supports, for our L students. And oftentimes there's not enough space for us to have private conversations in regards to students, how to best help them, how to best support them. Some of our current environmental challenges are our windows, even at the north, which are newer, don't open very much. There is no air circulation at all. It's extremely stifling in there. And like Suzanne said, some of our classrooms, when it gets warmer, even with the new windows, are upwards of 85 or 90 degrees. The lockers at the north, and I'm not sure, the younger kids may not use the lockers, but the lockers are pulling away from the wall, they're breaking. They've got like sharp pieces on them, just they continue to fall apart. Our bathrooms are really function properly. The pipes in our bathrooms make extremely loud noises when you turn on the cold water or when you flush the toilets, and they're overflowing, and they're just not working properly. They're antiquated, and we have inadequate heating throughout the year, and like Suzanne said, sometimes it's warm, sometimes it's cold. One of our big concerns as well, safety concerns, is that we do really not have enough doors to exit in case of an emergency. When the building was made many years ago, however many students there were a certain amount of doors during a fire drill, or if we ever need to evacuate during an Alice drill. When they rebuilt a couple of the doors, the front doors and some of the side doors, they decreased the number of doors that were in that space. We went from 2 doors to 1 door. So there really is not, in order for the building to evacuate in a orderly fashion, it's not really safe. And you know, I can understand that as a town, having to make these decisions on which school, even creating this short list, can be difficult, it can be scary. These numbers are big, no matter which option we look at. However, we need to think about what's most important to us, and that's our children in this town. And our aging schools do not provide our children with the kind of education and learning space that they deserve. A code upgrade does not actually improve the learning space for our students. A school and education, it isn't about the building. It isn't about making the building up to code. It's not about the roof, it's not about the windows, it's about the children and the learning that happen inside of the building. And we need to think about which option creates the best and most optimal learning environments. Just making a building up to code is truly failing our students. By building a pre-K to 5 school, we can more efficiently and effectively utilize our school and town resources to help our students. We can provide a safe and healthy environment, learning environment for students and staff. And as a longtime resident, taxpayer, parent, and educator in Wilmington, I strongly believe the future of our students in Wilmington will be stronger if we build a pre-K to 5 school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments tonight? Okay. Seeing none, next meeting is scheduled for April the 3rd for this committee. Again, we'll continue to provide the hybrid format. It seems to be working well, and hopefully the technical difficulties are minimal, and for those that are at home are able to both listen and hear appropriately. If there's any feedback that you have for us to try and improve this, we'll certainly work on that end. With that, unless there are any further questions this evening, looking for a motion. Mr. Coyote, I see, are you moving to adjourn?
Yeah, Mr. Brand, I'd like to, we're hearing the last two individuals talk about asbestos and circulation issues and leaks and overflowing toilets and putting, as if the schools are in such bad repair. And I have to stick up for the building department. I hope Dennis would say something, because you have some wonderful employees that take care of those buildings day in and day out. And I think the testimonies that were just given, and I get it. I know we need new schools, but come on. I mean, even you, Mr. Brand, should, you go to the schools every day. I mean, to put this type of commentary out into the public, I don't think it's very fair, especially to those good employees that do yeoman work day in and day out to try to make sure that the kids are safe. I mean, to say that we have security issues, it really, it's really shocking. I'm just, it's a sad commentary that we have to listen to that bashing of public employees who do a great job for the buildings and the schools.
Dr. Brand, if it's okay if I step in?
I'm not sure who's.
Christine.
Oh, Christine, sure.
Dr. Brand, I apologize, my voice is leaving. Mr. Carr, I need to address this. I've been an educator in Wilmington for 30 years, and everything that was spoken tonight is simply true and is a fact. And this was left on Dr. Brand's lap since he arrived in Wilmington. These problems existed before him. So yes, everything that was spoken tonight is very true, and I have lived it and watched it for 30 years plus. So that's all I have to say.
Dr. Brand, can I say something?
Sure.
So, I'm not an educator, I can't talk to how someone teaches or the atmosphere someone teaches in. But anytime any of these problems are reported, I don't think there's anyone that can say that the Public Buildings Department doesn't react quickly to resolve issues. We talk about asbestos tiles, they're not an issue to your health until they're friable. As soon as someone notifies us of an asbestos tile issue, it is addressed immediately. And there is never a point where we put anyone in danger. There's never a point where there's a leak in a bathroom that we don't address. There are times where material isn't available, and something may be done a little longer, but when we talk about overflowing toilets, they happen here all the time when someone jams a sweatshirt down the toilet. I don't have a control over that. And then we address it as fast as we can and resolve the issue. We have a great staff that works hard to keep everything going. In the 10 years I've been here, we've done a lot of capital improvements to improve schools. Again, I can't talk towards changing our learning environment, but as far as safety and concerns, we talked about the North Intermediate windows. They were designed to only open 4 inches, and that was supposed to be protection to the kids. And I believe if you do any windows, you're gonna open them 4 inches, not fully opened.
Right.
So as we talk about these things, those brand new windows aren't faulty. That's the design and the safety aspect that's put in by designers. So there's a lot of different things that we could talk about. I know one woman spoke about controlling the heat, or both of them. If it's not reported, we can't address it. I can't create AC for someone, but if someone's room's always 85 because something's not functioning properly, we can look at that and try to evaluate it. So I'll be talking to my custodian tomorrow, asking him to give me more information on those types of things. But I do take a little exception to the fact, I know what their point of view is looking for a better working environment and educating environment. But with what we have for buildings, we've worked hard to keep everything and improve everything on a yearly basis.
Thanks, Mr. Kelly. And if I may, and not just a response to Mr. Kyra, but those others listening, you know, rightly or wrongly, please understand that I operate and follow the meetings that I'm a part of, and when it comes to public comment, and that is that the school committee, of which I'm obviously a part of, although not a committee member, often receive public comments, and it is our policy and customary, rightly or wrongly, whether one likes it or not, to not respond in the moment for public comment, and that's the direction that I chose to take in this role as chair tonight. That being said, obviously, issues to Mr. Kelly's point raised around concerns around safety, please note that I've made note of those things, and those do deserve a follow-up, and I know that I'll work closely with Mr. Kelly to explore those. There are no other public comments tonight. We've addressed the next meeting, and so with all of that comes to the end of our meeting. I know a lot of information that has been shared with you all. I thank you for those members of the committee who are both at home, giving of your time, and those who are here tonight. This is an intense time period of this project. I've said this before. It's not lost upon me that we're asking an awful lot of our committee members, but I thank you for your investment and commitment on behalf of our community. And with that, looking for a motion to adjourn tonight.
Move to adjourn?
Mr. Ragsdale, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Prendergast. Roll call, Julie.
Dr. Brand,
Sorry.
Are you voting to adjourn?
Oh, I am, yes. I'm sorry. I am voting to adjourn, yes. It's like from the heavens.
okay, we'll start again. Dr. Brand,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Greg Bendel,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Alice Brown LeGrand,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Michael Demosio,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Vivian Barbedian,
Yes.
Christine Prendergast,
Yes.
and Justin Boucher.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good evening.
Good night, everyone.